Welcome back to 5 Acres Honey Farm. I'm Tara Lynn, and today's more of a 5 Acres Quail Farm edition. And if you haven't been following for a while, I've been raising Coturnix quail for about 2 years. And I also have a variety called Celadon, which has a genetic mutation which allows the quail to lay blue eggs. I got my original hatching eggs from Alchemist Farm in California, if you're curious about that. The reason for today's video, and I was really prompted to make this just personally, is because of a really bad experience that I just went through. And I was actually considering making this video last night. I was really upset, and I just felt it was more appropriate to calm down a little bit. We just got home yesterday after being away for 9 days, and I had week-old quail chicks in the brooder. And we had a pet sitter assigned to come every day while we were gone to make sure that they would be okay. Quail chicks are pretty messy, and I knew that typically, like with other animals, like we can do like every other day or kind of rotate friends visiting or staying here, but we needed daily visits for the babies. And even with the daily visits, I'm not really sure what's happened. The pet sitter had a helper stand in for her for some of the time, and that's when the deaths started. We had a quail chick die pretty much every day just when her helper started working. So I just wanted to go over a few basics on what constitutes a healthy quail brooder environment. Just quail chicks 101, because it seemed to be lost on the pet sitter's helper, and I really don't want this to happen to anyone else, and we're trying to identify exactly where the problem came from. So I'm just going to go over a few different things and show you here a little bit about like the kind of brooder that we use. So I'm going to flip this around and show you the brooder that I just kind of have sitting outside right now. I'll be sanitizing it shortly, and then I'll bring you inside to see the quail. They're in much better condition right now than they were earlier. So I'll go over that, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what happened while we were away. Okay, you may have seen in earlier videos, every winter I do like a sanitizing process with all of my pots from all my seedlings. And these are some of the bins that I use for that process. So this is just a standard tote that you'd get at your big box home improvement stores. It comes with a solid lid that my husband cut out the top and replaced with chicken wire and just bolted it in here. So we have 2 of these, and the nice thing about having 2 is, one, if there is a sick chick, it becomes an instant hospital. It's also a great hospital for chickens, if you got to remove one from the flock. And it's super portable. Like, I had a chicken a few years ago who was sick, and this was really easy to bring into the vet. It's a really nice way of keeping them confined when you need to move them around. The other thing that's nice about this is that it's easy to hose down and sanitize and store, and then you could use it for other things too in between having hatches and broods. So the important thing here is that it's breathable and protected. There was an incident last year where we had a snake in our basement, and I'm so glad that I was home at the time, but this would not be sufficient for keeping a snake out. But that's really not something that you kind of consider, or at least not something that I considered when I'm going to be brooding chicks inside of a house, inside of our own home. So having something that you can clean easily and then be able to, like, what I'll do later and what I did yesterday is, I had a clean brooder that I moved all the chicks into, and that way it gives me some time to sanitize the other ones. So it's a good way to just keep them always in a clean, safe space. But I'll take you inside and show you a little bit more. All right, I'm showing you this as an example. I've been home for about 24 hours now, and I just want to show you the amount of mess these baby quail make. I think there may be a baker's dozen in here now, kind of an unlucky number. But when we went on vacation, there were 18 chicks in here. So I think maybe there's 12 or 13 now. I didn't do an official count last night. So just to give you an idea, so this is their little heater. It's a radiant brooder, and I don't use a heat lamp because of the fire hazard. And this is their feed dish for right now, and I filled that up maybe like an hour and a half, 2 hours ago. This is the kind of mess they make. And then you can see there's this little bug flying around. These little guys don't look very happy. This is really not, I mean, they're a little active, some of them are, but you can see they're kind of like dull feather colors, kind of matted and stuff. But you can see how much of their droppings accumulate in just 24 hours. So my guess from what has happened, and I'll go into some more details, is that the mess was accumulating, their water was draining out, and it was just creating a terrible environment. I'm also very conscientious about keeping the water far from the food, and I'm having a feeling, based on how I found everything yesterday, that that wasn't the case, and that the food was very close to being contaminated by the water. So the other thing is that they love jumping up on this brooder now that they're bigger, so they make this mess. So it's like another thing that has to get cleaned. But like underneath right now, that's good to see. There wasn't anyone dead down there, but I'll just bring this a little closer down so you can see. They move so quickly, so it's harder to get a close look, but you know, like this, oh no, she's not gonna let me get too close, but they're usually not so kind of ratty and dusty looking. You know, a few of them I did, and this one's so small, a few of them I did give baths last night. This is typically not what they look like when they're about to be 3 weeks old. They are usually much more vibrant. You know, those guys are just hanging out in the corner. Usually they're all very active, and at this point they're usually all trying to jump out of the brooder. That's not the case too. So as you can see how much has accumulated in just 24 hours, you know, like what I'll be doing after this video is I'll be dumping all this mess and giving them clean food and cleaning their little heater brooder here, and hoping that they, oops, I don't like putting this in when I can't see who's there. Watch that little one. And hoping that they just continue to improve. So the one, this little one who's kind of shrugged over here, that's one that I did not think was gonna make it through the night. Really, really dirty. Like, he's still kind of dirty, and the wing feathers are so much longer, and you can kind of see like this one. They just all don't look their best. So, you know, I don't want to bother them too much. I also don't want them to be wet, you know, while, like, you know, we do have AC blowing and stuff, and there is an event on them right now, but I don't want to handle them too much and cause them too much, you know, irritation or anything. That one just looks so sad, this guy. But you know, being that they're doing a lot better today, I'll feel comfortable this evening, you know, doing some baths again for the ones that need it, and just giving them some time. I need to put like some kind of bug catcher down here to get these little kind of fruit fly things. And I'm hoping, what I'm planning to do now is, since yesterday one had died when we had gotten home, you know, I found her that way. I was originally going to put these little ones out with the adults this weekend when they were officially 3 weeks old. But given that they, you know, had been passing so frequently, and I want them to be in the best shape possible, I'm going to wait an additional week. And if another one does die, then I'm going to wait longer, which is going to be much more difficult, because we do, you know, it's just really hard to confine in the space that we have here. I really don't like keeping them inside when they're at this age, because you can see they do have, you know, a lot of their adult feathers. And right now it's in the 90s outside, so it's not like they're going to be cold. You they'll have a chance to like have fresh air and sunlight and just run around and be social, instead of being in the box. Like they're kind of doing that on a smaller scale here. But basic chick 101 is like at this state, this is like a good condition to look at to know it is time to clean. And this is just a day. And this is just 12 or 13 chicks. So considering that, I had left instructions for their bedding to get changed like every 4 days, that may have been, not the wisest choice. However, I had a friend visit the day before the helper and she didn't feel concerned about the condition of the bedding and the photos didn't look bad. So, as they get older, they make more of a mess. They love scratching into the food more. So a week ago, it may not have been to this level, but I wasn't here. And then the other thing is that with their food, considering we've got 12 or 13 chicks now, but before I had 18 when I left on vacation, that the level of food that they needed may have been more, and so they were competing with each other. So I'm seeing that they're very active into food now, and I'm just curious about maybe the amount of food that was available given their population. But this is not the first time that I've hatched quail, and it's not the first time that I have gone on vacation when they're in a brooder. It is the first time that I was away for such a long time while they were at this stage. It's also the first time that our pet sitter used this helper, and it was her first time being here helping out. So there are some factors at play, so it's hard to really determine the root cause, but all signs are pointing to lack of observation of their living conditions. So if you're seeing this condition, that's very typical of quail, and it's just a sign it's time to change their bedding. And again, like the bugs are here because this one is so cute, just poking out down here. When I got home and all the bedding was so wet, just being a sneaker over here, the bugs were already in the basement here. So it's not like they just developed right now. It's been all this time of them being in this situation. But yeah, you can see they're just kind of hanging out. They're not like playing and doing kind of fun stuff, where quail usually are. Again, so cute, right down there. All right, well, I think they've had enough attention for now, so we'll just let them go back to doing what they're doing, and I'll share a little bit about what happened. All right, so to share a little bit about what happened while we were away, we had left to go away for 9 days, which is pretty much the longest time we've been away from home. Maybe ever since we've lived here. We've been here 8 years. And of course, this is one of the hottest summers on record, so I was really nervous about leaving everybody. And I also don't really like traveling when we have baby chicks in the brooder because they are messy and they do need a lot of attention. But like I said, I had scheduled someone to come every day, and I had already scheduled a certain day for everything to be cleaned, and I assumed that they would use their judgment that if the brooder was unsanitary that they would clean it sooner or more often, but that wasn't the case. The first day that the pet sitter's helper came here, she texted me and said one of the chicks was dead, and it was allegedly the day after she had cleaned the brooder. And usually we'll lose 1, 2, maybe 3 chicks in a hatch, usually just failure to thrive, and that's just fairly common. So I didn't really think anything of it, but then the next day she texted me and said another one died, and the next day that happened again, and then the next day our pet sitter was back, and she said the house smelled really bad, and another chick had died. And so I asked her to clean the brooder, that I think that there's a problem. She came back the morning of the day that we were coming home. We were coming home late, and she changed their brooder out. And when I got home, the other thing I asked her to do is we have the heat brooder, and the little heater is adjustable so that you can raise it to grow with the chicks. And I feel like they're fairly common, so I didn't leave instructions to actually move it up with them. The pet sitter had mentioned a few things about the chicks before she had her last visit that made me think maybe, the chicks have their full feathers already. They probably don't need the heater, and maybe the heat and any moisture in the bedding is causing more problems than we need. So I asked her to remove it. But when I got home, it was obvious that that was not going to be the solution. They were still small enough where they needed a brooder. Their bin was fairly soaking wet. The water tower still had water in it. Keep hearing, I think it's a lizard, hopefully not a snake behind me. But there was a tremendous amount of water in the brooder. The chicks were wet. Their feathers were stuck to them. They were huddling. There was no food. One chick was dead with her head in the water. I have never ever owned animals that have ever been in this type of condition before. And I kind of went into frantic crisis mode and did not take any photos of the conditions because I was just in a rush to get them out of that really horrible situation. So the other brooder, I just, for mental clarity, I not only just rinsed it out, but I also sanitized it before putting them in it because I don't know what had been growing in that from the time we were away. So I moved them into the new brooder, fresh dry bedding. I also sanitized their water tower because I have no idea what condition that had been left in the last 9 days. And so I gave them fresh water. I have been going back and forth of whether or not I want to use electrolytes. I had purchased some from the store years ago and I've used them, but you can also make your own, which I could do too. But I also feel like there's a value in just having fresh, clean water. So I'm keeping them on fresh, clean water for a day, and I'm going to play it by ear, and I might make some electrolyte water for them. If you're interested in how I do that, just comment, and I'll do a separate video on that. The other thing I did was I made sure their heater was adjusted for their height. So they had a dry place that was warm for them to rest, and they had clean water. And I kind of got a clean food dish because the little food dishes that I was using were just caked in poo. And I got a clean food dish and topped it off. And I let them hang out for like an hour or two. And then I started giving them each individual time. So in that time, I was giving them a once-over physically to look for any problems, and half of the chicks had cemented feces and what had been wet food but now is dry, completely covering their nostrils, very close to their eyes. So I imagine probably the earlier ones that passed had eye infections, bacteria, couldn't breathe properly, didn't have clean food and clean water during this really sensitive time where they're growing tremendously at such a rapid pace. So I had to pry that cemented gunk off of their noses, and then I had a Q-tip from warm, clean water and just cleared their nostrils with that. Several of the chicks, like I mentioned, their feathers were caked to their body, so I gave them warm baths. I rubbed them with a towel and immediately put them under the warm brooder. There was one chick I really didn't think was going to make it through the night who did not oppose the bath. It was just very listless, doing whatever was needed, had no energy. I even saw it falling asleep in the food at one point yesterday evening. Today, acting much more normal, just not totally there yet, but light years ahead of what I was expecting. So I did that last night, and then every hour up until I went to bed, I changed their water dish out so that they'd have clean, fresh water. And because of all this, I really couldn't sleep very well last night. So I I got up in the middle of the night and gave them fresh food and water again. And I'm just noticing they have a very high appetite, which is really good to see, but it's also disconcerting because I'm wondering if they were also in these unsanitary conditions, were they also starving? Maybe I didn't say to leave enough food that they would need at this rate. I'm not sure. I just know that the house smelled really horrible, like wet bedding when we came home, which the pet sitter had kind of alarmed us of and alerted us of. And I I'm kind of glad that I didn't do this video last night because it was I was in a much more panicked state. But at the same time, I'm also disappointed that I didn't document the condition that they were in when I found them. It's it's so incredibly disappointing. I feel it's so avoidable. I feel like I was doing the right thing. I have such detailed instructions that I printed out, and I thought by having someone come every day that they would be fine. And this is just a lesson that, you know, in the future, either we don't go away when we have chicks, or if we really do have to, that their bedding must be changed every day, and that we need to like double or triple their food, you know, in a dry, you know, and really reinforcing has to be in a dry area. But otherwise, you know, these are just really simple things. It just needs common sense and attention. Any type of chick that you're raising, wet bedding, wet food, those are the formula for death. You are not going to have anything good come out of that. It is so important to keep the bedding dry, keep the food dry, clean water, you know, just kind of like the basics of survival, you know, shelter, food, water, all that stuff. You know, making sure there's not an environment where bacteria are going to grow, because they are so sensitive at this age. And these particular, excuse me, these particular chicks, you know, I hatched here from, you know, generations of quail that I've been raising. They've never been exposed to antibiotics. They've never been exposed to really anything. I haven't had any sick adults, you know, and the fatalities, like I mentioned, with chicks are fairly typical, to have one or two or three pass with each hatch. And this was actually the best hatch that I have ever had. Not in the sense of the hatch rate was great. The hatch rate wasn't that great. But all the chicks that hatched, none of them had any deformities. And by deformities, I mean if you're raising quail, you might encounter splayed legs, which is a really common thing where like their leg just didn't get into the socket. And there are ways of remedying that early. If you're interested in learning more about it, just comment about it and I'll do a video on managing splayed legs in quail. But this was the first hatch where every chick that came out had no leg problems. They were thriving. A few days before the pet sitter's helper started, I had friends checking on the quail, and they sent me pictures, and they looked fantastic the day before the pet sitter's helper started. So it's really, I really can't emphasize how upsetting it is to see such innocent little creatures in the early first days of their life in these conditions. And I just wanted to make this video to go over the basics. You know, if you are traveling and you have chicks at home, it might be more helpful to actually move the chicks to somebody's house. That was something that we were considering, so that they can have an eye on them all the time. The reason we were kind of hesitating with that is that, you know, because the chicks haven't ever had antibiotics or anything, we don't really want to expose them to a different environment where they could pick up anything. So anyways, thank you for listening to all of this and for hearing the sad story. And I hope that this unfortunate situation might help you and help your chicks, stay healthy and not have these problems. So thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. And as I mentioned, if there's any other quail related content, just comment and I'll get that up for you.